What's up, everybody? It's your boy, Z Money. We are back for the 21-47 playoffs. Another season in the books. If I sound beat up, it's because I am. I'm a little sick, but that does not mean you're not going to get your Zachetology. We're going to talk about the year, and then we'll get into these matchups. So for the season, I'm glad we had all this drama at the beginning of the season with the uploads. Because this was a very boring season. I expected this to be a transitional season where we saw the Jazz explode, maybe some other shakeups in the West, see the Sonics get worse. I don't know. See some new West teams do better. But the West has just gone exactly like these last three seasons. I forget how many the Jazz have. Have the Jazz won the last three? So this would make it the fourth season now. Literally like chalk. We almost got a little difference, which would have been pretty exciting if the Clippers could have pulled off the 4 seed over the Nuggets, because I think the Clippers are the worst team. Like, the Clippers in my rankings are not as good as the Nuggets, but it could have been interesting to see the Nuggets and the Jazz play, because that's kind of the one matchup. If you think of the Sonics, the Jazz, and the Nuggets as the 3 good West teams of this era, we never have gotten to see the Nuggets versus the Jazz. We've seen the Jazz versus the Sonics, and we've seen the Nuggets versus the Sonics, but we haven't gotten the other side of the triangle. We're still probably going to miss out on that, barring the Nuggets finally cracking the Sonics code. So the West was pretty boring, and none of the young teams are really any different. The Rockets are still doing Rocket stuff, and the Thunder and the Timberwolves are kind of like the crappy back end. The Mavs are new, but they're just not very good. The East is more interesting. The problem with the East, it's interesting because there's some really young and exciting teams that I'm hyped to talk about and watch play, like most notably the Pistons, the Celtics, and the Magic. However, the unfortunate part about the East is that I could just call the Heat are going to the finals right now. I don't really think there's another team of that quality. It might be the Magic would be my next favorite team. I don't think I really like the Celtics that much, but yeah, I think we have a pretty straightforward. We might be headed for the Jazz Heat. It seems like the Jazz are still maintaining that similar, pretty strong and likely not beatable lead against the rest of the Western contenders. I didn't expect it, but Randy Brown and Rijkaard are really fucking good. What are you going to do? All right, so let's get into the matchups. We'll start from the bottom like always. We get the Heat versus the Bulls. There's not a lot to talk about here. The Bulls suck. The Heat are really good. The Heat, I think I like what Alex did with the acquiring of Olin. His cookies are really, or he put all his cookies in one jar for this year with the Olin trade. I think his team is just because of cap and everything, Tezuka's getting old. It's going to be tough for them to continue to be good after next season. Their main hope was probably that the East just remains so bad. There's maybe one more year of contention. However, I think they compare favorably with the Jazz and the Sonics, as a team that could totally win the finals. Their stats are amazing. Winning 77 games or whatever they won, I don't know how I feel about that, but their stats look amazing. And I think when they were 77-5, they might have only dropped games to the Jazz, the Sonics, and the Nuggets or something like that. So Heat are on cruise control for the finals, in my opinion, to this moment. All right, next we get the Pistons Hawks. This is going to be very exciting. The Pistons are one of my favorite new teams. I think maybe it was not this most recent offseason, but the offseason before. I said I liked the Chris Giuotti, Ulrich Seidenbach, Long Blackwood trio as the next new young trio to potentially make a big impact in the league. And we're seeing the signs this season. In terms of plus minus and raw win-loss totals, there's definitely more to be desired from the Pistons. They were pretty mid, 2.5 differential, 47 wins. That's not very good. The Hawks, 57 wins, 9 differential. So the Hawks way outweigh the Pistons in the stats. But you go look at some of these individual Pistons players. You look at Long Blackwood's season, still a lot of growth, before he's a true killer. But the signs that Long Blackwood's going to be great are obvious. The exact same thing with Ulrich Seidenbach. Ulrich Seidenbach already looks very, very good. And so you think if he has any more growth, that he could become extremely dangerous. And then Chris Giuotti is probably the worst of the 3 at this moment. but he has maybe the best in terms of like versatility and defensive potential. Excuse me. The big problem for the Pistons is that Long Blackwood not filled out. I'm not sure how I feel about Chance Roman. The fouling is obviously notorious. And then the only other player, and though I do like this player, I like Jabari Smith, they just don't really have a bench that excites me very much. So it's not like a fully fleshed out team. Meanwhile, the Hawks are playing that very weird Hawksy ball where all the players look like shit, but they just never turn the ball over. And so they seem to always just crank out 60 wins and a plus 10 plus minus. The interesting thing, Granville de los Santos, he's fallen off a cliff. I mean, this was one of the biggest deaths we've seen. He simultaneously stopped taking as many inside shots, and all of his percents just went down drastically. It's not that surprising. The dude, this is his 34th season or his 34-year-old season, so like this was always bound to happen. He just hit the athleticism cliff, but that's tough. Another interesting thing, obviously, Timmy Hamilton is going to be out of this matchup. So I think this will be a very saucy matchup. I think the thing for me, the Hawks are a better team. A lot of these guys I just like as well-rounded, fully fleshed out players. Guys like Keegan Murray, Timmy Hamilton, although, again, he's going to be out. Jamel Abraham, Jason Jackson, like even though those guys aren't amazing, they at least play a little defense, play a little offense, don't turn the ball over. Even Granny, even though he's only scoring at 55% true shooting, he still plays offense, or he still plays defense. He still gets 8 boards a game. That's more than can be said about some of the Pistons players. But no Timmy Hamilton means we could see some Long Blackwood magic. Long Blackwood's going to get Jason Jackson as a matchup. Jason Jackson is an okay defender, but he can be shut down and he can chuck. And then I'm also very interested to see Ulrich Seidenbach against an aging Granny. This is a split series. The stats all say the Hawks, but the injury to the Hawks, and I like the 3 players on the Pistons maybe more than I like any individual Hawks player. I'm going Pistons in 7. Saucy matchup. This one's going to be fun. I think, outside of the individual matchups, Chris Joati, Ulrich Seidenbach, Long Blackwood, any of these guys feel like dudes who we could see like become he's dropping 30 to 40 in a playoff game. And they haven't, when the reputations are being crafted for a player, they haven't had any postseason experience yet. That's the most fun time to watch them because they can turn into legends or become infamous for being trash. So we'll get to see how that plays out. Banger matchup of round 1 for the East. This one right here, Pistons-Hawks. All right, next we got the Celtics-Wizards. So the Wizards, this is the kind of same old aging Wizard squad. The one difference, and the biggest difference, is they lost Chuck and they've added Wendell Moore Jr., who fills a similar role. He plays defense, which Chuck never played, and he's had an insanely good year. I'm not a total buyer on Wendell Moore Jr. Like, he's kind of like, before this season, he's like dollar store Joe Sandberg. Now that he's had this season, you're like, well, maybe he really is Joe Sandberg. I'm not a super believer in these stats, the 62% true shooting. I mean, anytime a player increases their percentages across the board like this, and they are over the age where there was likely any growth left, you just kind of go like, okay, probably just a good season. Like, it happens, and I'm not totally buying. And then the rest of this team is like, okay players, but nothing super special. Arlie Carey is dead. Hernando Alaminas is kind of like a very rock-solid starter. Kendrick Gomez, again, another rock-solid starter. Julian Suttles is kind of getting old. I think, like, he gets a shitload of blocks, but I don't know. Like, guys who are not super athletic and then have a C-plus post defense, they always worry me. So there are interesting things about the Wizards. The Wizards had some very good stats this season. But there's also just clearly no, like, big money player. At least Wendell Moore would have to change his current, the way everybody's felt about him. He hasn't done well in the playoffs in the past for that to be the case. The Celtics are a really interesting team. Everybody was just in the chat today whining about how, or Evan, I should say, was in the chat whining about how you can only win with 3-point players and big men who jump. And I don't disagree with that. But the Celtics have shown really interesting play. 66 wins, 14-point differential. So they're a rock-solid team. I kind of have them in that third tier. There's like the Jazz Heat tier. Then there's like maybe the Sonics Nuggets tier, and then I think there's like the Celtics, Clippers, maybe like Magic, Rockets tier. But the Celtics, the way they do it is interesting. Their offense, if you just go down and you look at their players' true shooting, it sucks. All their top players, Diana Taurasi, Richard Johnson, Thomas Chandler, Johnny Jones, although Johnny Jones is more a passer. So I'll just say those other three. They're all pretty mid. Like Richard Johnson, 54% true shooting. Diana Taurasi, 57% true shooting. Thomas Chandler, 56% true shooting. And these are like their leading scorers. It's like 60 points a game from that. Awful. But the Celtics are the most rebounding dominant team we've seen in a long time. The Celtics just are at the top of every single rebounding stat. They're crushing the league in terms of average rebounds a game. And it's translated into super, super good plus minus. And it's just that every player kind of happens to be an AA rebounder that's getting minutes on the team. And, Richard Johnson, Toilet Atlas, Diana Taurasi. Even if you go down the list to, they have some guard who also gets boards, if I'm not mistaken. Johnny Jones, not as good as I thought he was. He has the potentials, but he's not filled out. So the Celtics chuck pretty poorly, but they get so many boards that I think it's boosting both their offensive and defensive percentages big time. So the interesting thing is, how will that play out as we get deeper into the playoffs and you play better teams? Fortunately for the Celtics, they don't have to play a great team in the Wizards. But the Wizards also kind of got shafted getting the 7 seed. The Wizards are better than the 7 seed. I would take the Wizards over the Hawks and the Pistons probably. So this is a weird, somewhat close matchup that I think will also go pretty deep. In terms of like specific matchups that I'm looking out for, really, it's all about Wendell Moore. In terms of any individual player between these two teams that's going to get the ball a lot with a lot of opportunity to make an impact, it's going to be Wendell Moore. The Wizards funneled the ball to him a lot. And depending on how the Celtics play it, the current person that he's going to be up against is either Thomas Chandler or Diana Taurasi. And the thing about those two players is they're fucking terrible defenders. So if you are Gasper, you kind of have this question of like, okay, do you do a big move to move a defender into that spot? Like, do you move Shupinis out of small forward to try and hit Wendell Moore, or do you just play your team as is? I don't know what the answer is. I personally would probably go out of my way to put Shupinis on Wendell Moore and move him to the shooting guard slot, just because your offense is already trash. Like, there's no point in trying to like optimize your own offense and get Taurasi or Chandler looks. Like, they are already bad. It can't get any worse. So focus on shutting down the other team's offense. I think if they get that matchup, the Wizards just won't have a great way to score points. And if the Wizards are chucking and missing, then it's double bad because the Celtics are the best rebounding team in the league. However, anytime you have something like this where it's a matchup dependent thing to do well, then it could be spicy, because Wendell Moore could totally be unlocked by getting to go against Diana Taurasi the entire series, or go against Thomas Chandler the entire series, and just like drop 30 points efficiently. That's all it could take. So I think this one will actually also go to 7. The Pistons Hawks, I like a little more because it has the upset potential. I think the Celtics still pull this one off. A little bit of team rebounding. I think as we watch this, the Wizards may just, both teams will probably look gross from the percentage perspective, but we may just like see the Celtics taking 10 more shots a game, and that's all it takes for them to win. All right, last matchup in the East, we have the number 3 Magic versus the number 6 Sixers. So the Magic, one of the stories of the East, coming out of nowhere to be good. Did the Magic go to the playoffs last season? Let me check really quick. I want to say they did, right? But they kind of just got immediately waxed. They made it to round 2 last season. So, but they only won 48 games. So this season, winning 61, drastic improvement. There's a case to be made that they're the second best team in the East. Or at least I would make that case. They have Cantor Bakwa, who obviously is one of my favorite players. Shaedon Sharpe continues to be, I can't decide if he's amazing or not player, but he did hit the 60% true shooting mark. So like, there's a little reason to believe, and he's got the athleticism where you think like he might be able to work against any type of defense and still be productive. And then Braxton Hicks is one of my favorite like utility defense players. He's huge. He's got enough good athleticism, good defensive ratings, and he's not like actively totally annihilating your team on offense. He's only like a minor hindrance. And then Chase Martinez, who's a really interesting mystery player. Chase Martinez this season was very good. But I don't know, because of his defensive limitations, if I ever am going to love him. He's got a lot of potentials on offense to fill out. He can get better at the inside. He can get better at the three-point shooting. He can get better at the passing. And if all of those happen, will his offensive package get over the fact that his single best current rating of any defensive stat is a B-? I don't know. But he's interesting. So this makes the Magic really fun to watch. Can Chase Martinez be leveraged to maybe put up 30 in a game or two at that efficient stat line? It'll be tough with Shaedon taking the shots, but like there's potential for some interesting things to happen. The Sixers are the same old Sixers team, the Philadelphia Rosenbergs. Omer put together another rock solid season, just like being force fed the ball. The outside of the Omer part of this team, the thing that kind of I expected would change more so than it did. I thought Bubba Day would be better. Bubba Day popped purple. I think the implication was not this offseason, but the offseason before, that he had plus TC'd. And so you look at it, he's 7 feet tall. He's got A- 3-point shooting. For a 7-footer, his athleticism is fine. He's got almost A on the inside. And this dude still can't crack freaking 60% true shooting. I really thought he would do better. Outside of that, there's a lot of the same people that we've seen on this team. Richard Pollard is going to chuck. Skeet is back onto the Sixers, and he's fine. He's a solid 2-3 guard, plays a little defense, does a little scoring. The point guard slot for the Sixers is a just total mess. I think right now they're playing either Seth Lee or Quandrez Tinkerer, and Quandrez Tinkerer is just, he's not it. Unathletic and 6'2". Even if you have good defensive ratings, which he doesn't really have, he's just a sieve. I don't know. I'm thinking of how it's spelled in my head, and it sounds weird. That's not the point. I do not like Quandrez Tinker. I get that he's got A passing, and Jack is just jerking off to offensive stats. But I just don't think it's going to end well for him. Specifically, I would be concerned. Look, there's a couple places the ball is absolutely going to end up. And it's in two things when you're the Sixers. It's in Omer Rosenberg's hands and it's in Dick Pollard's hands. And the big problem is the Magic have really good answers to those two players in Cantor Bakwa, who's one of the premier stop inside shots big men, and then Braxton Hicks, who if he gets the matchup on Dick Pollard is really bad news, because I always say, and I still believe, tall athleticism is what stops three-point shooters, and Braxton Hicks is the best tall athlete probably in the league right now for stopping that. So not only are the Magic statistically superior by a really solid margin, they've almost got double the plus minus, and they have home court. They also, in my opinion, have the favorable matchup for who I think will go off on the Magic in this. Right now would be Shaedon Sharpe. This is the ideal matchup for Shaedon Sharpe, would be to get Quandrez Tinker. I think if you rip out Seth Lee, it could be interesting because Seth Lee's a defender. So I would be doing that if I'm Jack. But I still just don't think that's enough. Seth Lee's a terrible shooter. And so there's just too many. Again, the entire Sixers team is a giant defensive hole. And if they're up against a team that can stop them, which I think they are, I think they're going to get fucked. So the Sixers drew some really good matchups last season. I don't think they're going to get those same really good matchups in the early rounds this season. So I'm going to go with the Magic in 6. And I'm excited to see some guys if Chase Martinez and Shaedon Sharpe get some open, good matchups, see him put up some big stats. All right, now we'll get to the big boy league, the West. Alex can call himself a big boy, but everybody else in the East, I think, still has to stay at the kids' pool. The number 2 seeded Sonics versus the Mavericks. So the big cheat game, or the cheat season for the Sonics, ended just like every other Sonics season in this era. The Sonics look amazing, but amazing is not good enough. You have to be unbelievable to stand up to the Rycourt-Brown combo. The big change-up for the Sonics this year was the elevation of J.D. Davison to J.D. Davison came at the trade deadline for the Sonics last season, and he was kind of relegated to a bench role because there were some other guys like Ney who were taking the minutes for the team. Now, those guys are gone. Ney is gone. Luciano's been removed from all minutes. So J.D. Davison can get the point guard spot. And that part has gone super well. J.D. Davison is a beast. Seth Charles is putting up a career year. Cheaty McCheaterson continues to look like the reincarnation of Joe Sandberg. Just put together another ludicrous season. If the Sonics can get the regular season production out of these players, most notably McCheaterson, that they got, or if they can get that in the playoffs, what they did in the regular season, the Sonics can go all the way. This entire offseason is just going to be the final chance for McCheaterson to put like an amendment on his current, like, people's opinion of him, which is choking in the playoffs. He does have a tough matchup in terms of, like, the Mavericks are literally a one Gelatoge's meme scorer and, like, elite perimeter defense. So it'll be tough for McCheaterson. But if McCheaterson wants to be the best shooting guard in the league, eventually you just got to, like, it doesn't matter if Bluey Healer is a 6'5" AA defender. You just got to score the points. The Sonics are a way superior team to the Mavericks. Again, I feel like I pretty adequately described the Mavericks just there. They also have Morris. So, like, there are players I like on this team. I don't hate Luffy, Bluey Healer. Luffy and Bluey Healer, who play point guard and shooting guard for this team, both kind of filled the same slot, which is, like, you want one of them as your, like, shooting guard defensive specialist, because neither of them are really meant to be point guards, in my opinion. They're both trash passers. Bluey can kind of pass, but I would prefer to have, like, a true point guard at that spot. The Mavericks are just short on offense and defense. While the Mavericks have good perimeter defense, the Mavericks have an aging Stephon Anderson as their post defender, so he's unathletic. He does play post defense, but he doesn't get blocks. Ricky Knox is just a straight up bad defender. He's short at the position at 6'9", and he's only a B post defender. And then when it comes to the offensive side of things, I mean, Morris is an okay offensive player. And then Ricky Knox is also kind of that okay. But, like, neither of these guys cracked 60% true shooting on the season. The one little bit of drama to this matchup is that the Mavericks did split. They went 2-2 against the Sonics in the regular season. So you might be thinking, well, the Mavericks, like, something special. If you look at the individual games, I'm a little less of a believer that the Mavericks have something, because between those two games that the Mavericks won, they averaged 50% from three, and the Mavericks are not a good three-point shooting team. I think the Mavericks are like 25th in three-point percentage as a team. The Mavericks are 20th in three-point percentage at 31%. So the fact the Mavericks in two games were shooting 50% from three strikes me more as an anomaly that helped them win a couple unexpected games, more so than something that will repeat in this series. So I'm, not a big hot take to pick the Sonics, who've just been, like, with this era, very robustly making it deep into the playoffs, while the Mavericks kind of sit. And I don't know if there's much of a future for this Mavericks team. Where the Mavericks are at right now, they have some very interesting players that probably have value in the league, and there are some obviously very good drafts coming up. Probably a good time for the Mavericks. I don't know if their GM does anything, but to get on it. But we'll see. I'm the new GMs I haven't quite gotten in the loop with. All right, next, Nuggets Thunder. So the Nuggets, although they did have a very strong, the Nuggets had a very up and down season. They started the season unbelievably well. It was like the Nuggets are definitely going to be the 2 seed. They could fight with the Jazz for the 1 seed. And then they had this absolute collapse in, like, the, near the end of the season, starting at the mid of the season. And it's like, oh my God, could the Nuggets, like, get behind the Rockets and be the 5 seed? And then they clutched out, like, the last 15 or 10 games to just sneak in a tiebreaker over the Clippers and preserve the 3 seed. So the good news is they dodged the Rockets, who are a team that I think can win in round 1. The bad news is they don't get a true garbage team like the Mavericks. They get the Thunder, who the Thunder have a pulse, although I think the Nuggets will cruise. This Nuggets team, everybody's talked about it. The Erskine Abdul thing, like, even Evan knows is just fucking stupid. Like, this copium of, like, oh, I'm playing this team because that's how I want the league to work. Like, shut the fuck up. That's what a dumb fucking take. Like, you just made some bad moves and invested in a guy who's not good, and, like, you should fix it. So the thing that's saving the Nuggets, because I think the Nuggets have certain good pieces, but Abdul absolutely has to go. He's an absolute net negative. Is that Lester McQuaid has blossomed into, like, there's an argument I think to be made that Lester McQuaid is the best player in the league. And like, it's that simple. I realize his shooting percentages are short of the like at least regular season numbers of like Rycourt and Brown and McCheaterson. Like, they're all getting the 67% true shooting, like insano style shit. But like, I'm pretty sure McQuaid finished at 64%, which is insane. On 30 points a game, he's getting 3.2 blocks. He's like leading the league in rebounds. This dude is literally like a generational center, and he's carrying this fucking team. I really don't like the rest of Evan's team. There are okay pieces here and there. Harlan Davis is fine. I kind of think Dorsey is fine. I still have the size concerns with Dorsey, and like, will he just get rocked by the larger front courts in the league? But he's fine. Mississippi Delta might be good one day. I don't know. Hard to say. Jalen Williams is fine. I like Dennis Reynolds a lot as a point guard. Joe Sandberg is too old. I mean, he tried. He tried this season, but I just don't think he's great. But Erskine Abdul is taking so many shots. Like, if you just cut Erskine Abdul from this team, these shots are going to go to quality places. Give Matthew Dorsey, give Jalen Williams, give Dennis Reynolds, and especially give McQuaid all these points. Like, I would, if I'm the Nuggets, I would bench McQuaid for the playoffs. Like, I legitimately think if you just give McQuaid 15 minutes on the bench, or not McQuaid, excuse me, if you give Abdul 15 minutes on the bench, he's going to be more efficient because he's playing against scrubs. He'll still score a lot of points so he could be impactful in a positive way, and he's not going to chuck your team out of games. There are some juicy fucking lines from Abdul in some recent games, and they're truly wild. So I want to cover a couple of them because I remember seeing them. Okay. February 8th, a loss to the Magic. Erskine Abdul goes 12 of 39 for 28 points. February 13th, against the Los Angeles Clippers, Erskine Abdul goes 10 of 30 for 23 points. And then this is my favorite one. This was when the Nuggets were in full collapse, by the way. And I don't know if Evan made game plan changes or whatever, but I remember looking at these lines when I was looking at what's wrong with the Nuggets, and it was amazing. All right, the best one. February 16th, lost to the Thunder. Playoff matchup, by the way. 14 of 46. 46 fucking shots for 31 points. I mean, Jesus Christ. And there's a lot of these where you're taking, like Erskine Abdul taking over 25 shots and scoring less than 1 point per shot, which is just unbelievable. So, yeah, he bad. Good news for the Nuggets. They're up against the Thunder. And the fact that the Nuggets have, like, a top 3 player in the league. Right now, if you ask me to rate it today, where would I put McQuaid? I don't know. The top 4 is all tough. Like, Rycourt, Brown, Olin Harris, and McQuaid are kind of like my clear consensus top 4. And I don't know where I put them, but anyway, the Nuggets have one of these like super duper stars. The Thunder do not. The Thunder are in a weird spot. I don't like a lot of the moves they made, offloading Morris to get nothing. Like, I don't like the way they're using Ney. I know that Ney is putting up great stats offensively, but is he doing great for your team? I think he's better in a bench role. He's like the having an F minus athlete, or an FF, I guess, athlete is just starting. I just don't think it's good. I like Jalen Duren. I like Milan Garrett. Frederick Jones is solid. That's kind of where my love of this team ends. Carmichael Brown is finally too old. A season ago, I would have been cool with Carmichael Brown. That's over. This team is thin. I don't know what their future is. Like, there was a time where he had Jalen Duren and a bunch of other players. The only player I really love their future outlook of this team is Jalen Duren. He's young, but it's almost like, I don't know if the Thunder even have time to build around him. It's like, should you be getting rid of Jalen Duren and just pressing the reset button? If I was in Jack's shoes, I would definitely be thinking hard about that exact thing. They're going to get waxed by the Nuggets. I think the dream scenario for the Thunder is that Jalen Duren does good against McQuaid, which, like, I love Jalen Duren, but not only is he day-to-day injured, but he's just not as good as McQuaid, even though I love him. And that somehow him and Milan Garrett, who are both like the 2 best players on this team, somehow shut down McQuaid, and that, like, you just have the Erskine Abdul masterclass of just ruining the game, right? That 14 for 46 game he had against the Thunder just on repeat, and it happens 4 times. That's the path to victory for the Thunder. I just don't think it's going to happen. I think we're going to get a 4-1 here. McQuaid domination. All right, next up is our premier matchup in the West. It is the Clippers versus the Rockets. So the Rockets. Oh wait, do the Rockets get the 4 seed and the Clippers got the 5 seed? Oh no, it's the okay. Sorry, it's the division leader thing. So the Clippers will have home court. That got me all fucked up for a second. So the Rockets, a very Rocketsy squad. I don't really think they have any championship aspirations, but it is a team that's putting together good stats. I love this Rockets front court. So from the small forward position on up, I really like this team, and the point guard, shooting guards positions. I'm just not as convinced. I love Patrick Baldwin Jr. as a average starting player. He shoots the 3 ball well. He plays a little less than a little bit of defense, but being 6'9" and having some quickness to you makes me happy. I love Denver Bradford. Denver Bradford for a long time has been one of my favorite young up and coming players. I continue to love Denver Bradford. This dude's a fucking monster. But calling him a monster might be overrated because he doesn't score a lot of points, but he's just the perfect set it and forget it center. He's a different type of player than Jalen Duren, but I value them similarly. And it's just the perfect role-playing center. He doesn't do too much. He's not your star player, but fuck, I would love to have him as my third or fourth best player. And that's exactly what Brian has. Tyler Jones is good. It's just the contract that was a catastrophe. He shouldn't be getting paid $20 million, but he's a good player. So those 3, I love. Great front court. When you get to the point guard, shooting guard positions, Arya Gato and Ludmila Pavlichenko are both these fine 3-point shooty tall guards. You just wonder how well will they hold up? They both are kind of these high variability 3-point shooters. Will it go well in the playoffs? Will it not go well in the playoffs? If you go look at Arya Gato, for example, in the playoffs, it's all right, well, last season Arya Gato was 60% true shooting in the playoffs, and the season before she was 52% true shooting. So I'm all about living and dying by the 3. So I have no problem with these 2 players. It's just the lack of defense. Arya Gato is a straight up bad defender in my opinion. Ludmila Pavlichenko is an okay defender. B+ perimeter D, not much else to offer. A little high on the fouls. So okay, whatever. In terms of the matchups, the Clippers, well, you can just listen to my email sounds. Clippers were a team that overachieved big time in my opinion. I keep looking at the Clippers roster, wondering what the fuck they did that's good. Obviously, Mike Mortar is a great player. Mike Mortar is probably, although in the whole McQuaid versus Mike Mortar debate, I think is settled in that Mike Mortar is just not as good. He's still a great fucking player. And I think beyond Mike Mortar, this team doesn't have a lot that I love. I have players that I have no problem with. I have no problem with Claudio Villanueva. I get he's a little older, but he's a fine fill-in. I have no problem with Sierski. He's kind of like the perimeter version of Claudio Villanueva. I have no problem with Philip Batista. But then there are players I have problems with. I hate Sophie Roach, and I hate Elliot Thomas, and Doc seems to be convinced to playing them. I realize that he doesn't have good alternatives to them, but that's your own fucking problem, dude. You put together a shitty roster. The fact that this team has been getting away with nearly a 15 plus minus and 164 games really boggles my mind. I really don't like this team. Maybe Mike Mortar is just that good, but when I look at everything else, my biggest concern is this. Sophie Roach and Elliot Thomas are the second and third leading scorers on this team behind, what's his name? Mike Mortar. Both of these players are the exact type of players that I expect to have their efficiency take a wild hit against increased postseason talent. Sophie Roach is too short. That never goes well unless you're a god tier 3-point shooter, which Sophie Roach is not. Sophie Roach is maybe cracking 40% on the 3-point shooting, not A+ in the rating. Elliot Thomas is I know I meme and call everybody Gelatogis. Elliot Thomas really is the Gelatogis type. I mean, short, 6'7", not quite that AAA athlete. And the stats show that. Elliot Thomas is a 57% true shooting player. If I'm Doc, God, I'm trying to figure out a way. Sophie Roach can be benched for Victor Sandeep. And I think that's actually the path that I would be taking if I'm Doc. Just bench Sophie Roach. Seems pretty straightforward. Elliot Thomas is a little harder to deal with because you don't have as good of a fill-in. You have Bob Thompson, who's not very good, and then Mason Wilson, who's also really bad. So I feel like you have to play some Elliot Thomas minutes, but man, would I want to be limiting those minutes. In terms of specific matchups, I like the Rockets for this matchup. The Rockets have a really good defensive front court. Victor Bart, although I don't know if he's ever going to be the man, and he's got like a contract I don't love, similar to Tyler Jones. The Victor Bart, Denver, Bradford, Tyler Jones front court, like Brian can just throw giant guys who are like defensive specialists at Doc, and like I think that could make it hard for Mike Mortar to have good games, and Mike Mortar is going to be getting the ball a lot. And so and then on the flip side, we just have this like 3-point shooting of the Rockets, and I'm not sure that the Clippers have a great way to stop that, especially at the point guard slot, because at the point guard slot, even though I like Sandeep more than Sophie Roach, they're both 6 foot tall. So if I'm Bryant, I am putting my favorite of my 3-point shooters, which is probably Arigato, might be Lucky Buckner. But anyways, Ludmila, Arigato, Lucky Buckner. You put one of those 3 at point guard, you focus them, and you just watch them feast. Doc could get really wild and like use both Batista and Siersky as the starting 1 and 2 as like a defensive matchup. It sacrifices a bunch of passing and stuff. I don't hate it because it's good defense. But at the end of the day, I think this is going to be a real hair-splitting series. I'm really not sold on the Clippers. This entire time, I think I'm going to pick the Rockets in 7. Doc's team just concerns me. The allure of that one series of Mike Mortar against the Nuggets before he got injured is really the only reason I like the Clippers when I look at this roster. I realize they won 64 games. They beat me twice. They clearly beat a bunch of good teams to get this record that they have in these stats, but I still just am not buying it. So they'll need to prove it by just at least holding home court against the Rockets, which is not an easy matchup. All right, last we have the Jazz and the Timberwolves, and we're going to keep this one quick. The Jazz are going to annihilate the Timberwolves. We will talk about the Jazz, who everybody knows very well, in the round 2 video, assuming they can hold on against the brutal Timberwolves elite team. So without further ado, these are the matchups. Some fun in the East. We're going to get some new people in the second round of the East, likely. If we get Sixers, Magic, Hawks, Heat, that would suck, but I just don't think we will. And then in the West, whatever. The West just never changes. We're just watching a fucking video on repeat. Whoop-de-doo. Enjoy The Sims, and then we will have another video and hook 'em.